Welcome back to another Knowing You show. I know I took a little hiatus. I was on sabbatical for a few months in terms of just stepping back a little bit from my Knowing You show and my Soul of an Empath podcast, and just kind of being with myself and helping out family who was going through some stuff. And now I'm back. And I'm happy to bring on to the show today Marianne Strange, and let me tell you a little bit about her. Marianne Strange is the owner and CEO of Speak to Engage. She's a confident communication expert, helping her clients speak their story. She has over 20 years experience in communication and worked with adults and children who stammer and stutter as a specialist speech and language therapist. And that experience led her to help entrepreneurs who are ready to step into their own power with their voices. And she's coming at us live from England. Thank you so much for, talking to us from across the pond.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's always exciting.
Yes. So tell us how you got started in this line of work. Like, what had you want to do confident communication as your niche?
That's my niche. Yes. Good question. Well, when this goes back, I suppose, as many stories do, with its roots, I suppose, tap roots in my childhood. And I was all right speaking, and I didn't have any overt problems, but I was quite a sensitive child. It was only years later I found out maybe I was an empath. So I was really tuned in to other people. And, if they weren't listening to me or people spoke louder, I tended to back off and and let other people speak. And I became a very good listener. But I noticed that when I was in even my early 20s, I started to realize that I would start to observe how some people, if they sounded very authoritative and said things very clearly and stood, even if they weren't necessarily saying anything particularly accurate, would be listened to. And sometimes think politicians sometimes they come across with all this pizzazz, and people sometimes listen to them, and they're not always getting it all right. And then people like me sometimes would be a bit more hesitant, might sometimes get it absolutely right. In fact, I could think of a few episodes when I was thinking, no, that person, that's not right. I know I've got it right, but because of the way I was coming across, it was the other person that was listened to. And then I started to look around and see that a lot of other people, I was not alone. It wasn't I wasn't being singled out for this treatment, and that a lot of other people, sorry, the sun is, so I have my lighting. So I wasn't being singled out for this treatment, and other people were often being quiet and standing back, not being heard. And that rather led me to start my training in speech sciences, that led me to started to work with children and adults who stutter, very much because they also needed this confidence.
I can imagine that people who stammer and stutter definitely have that, like, could use a confidence boost.
Yes,
because people probably tease them and make fun of them, and there's wounds around not being able to be heard.
It's so interesting that, yes, very much so. And yet it was a fascinating topic, and I learned a lot about it myself. But not everybody needed to come for extra support. So some people who stuttered could have quite an open, some might say quite significant stutter, but they were fine with it. And you know what? Other people were fine too. And people came to me, maybe were more sensitive, and they wanted to be heard. And yes, very much you described how they felt. And that's how I started to get in. And then as they started to realize what it was all about, you know, some of the things that were maybe holding back, and taking practices and testing it out in their daily experiences, then they really found the difference, that even if they did have the stutter, it was completely different experience. And so they were actually able to be more confident and to be more themselves. They weren't having to hide all the time with this image that people are thinking I'm stupid if I stutter. And so that experience taught me a lot, and I started to look a lot deeper into this thing about the confidence and speaking. And then entrepreneurs started to come, and business people started to come and find me and ask for help in presentations and things like that. And that's how I started to get interested in the confident speaking and the confident communication, because I feel that absolutely, well, all of us, I mean, just like with my clients before, some people would never perceive the need and they were fine, but there are so many of us out there that could do with that extra boost of confidence, not to be feeling comfortable to speak their truth, be themselves when they're communicating with others, especially when it's about their business.
And why do you think it's important for people to speak their truth?
Well, because and I would just define the sort of the speaking their truth is really sort of being themselves, aligning themselves to their values, grounding themselves in who they really are. Because it doesn't quite work. I was having an interesting conversation with somebody today, and we are taught really from almost as a baby, as a child, how that we are given other people's stories. We're taught in school, you've got to do things this way. And there's so many directions that we grow up with that we often go through life with a little bit of a mask. Sorry for the pun, it's relevant, nothing to do with this crisis. But we often don't necessarily interact with everybody as really ourselves and feel comfortable about being ourselves. And I've definitely been there myself. You know, I used to, when I would step back, it took me a long time to realize that what people really want to connect with is the real person that's speaking. And as an entrepreneur, that's very, very important. There's so many marketing gurus out there that actually saying you've got to do it this way and you've got to do it that way. And I'm sorry, I've had years of experience, and look where it's got me. And of course, certainly many of us do our best to do it that way. And then we think of ourselves as failures because it doesn't always work for us. That doesn't feel like us, and we get a bit confused. Whereas when we start to speak through story and be ourselves, then that's when people have a sense that they really are getting the real you, and they start to connect with you.
And how do people tap into finding their story? And is there more than one story?
Oh, very good question.
Because, you know, when people ask me that question, I can think of at least 10 off the top of my head. And I'm like, all right, well, which one should I use right now?
Yes. Well, I definitely believe there are. I know. And there's another thing that we sort of tend to sometimes in the entrepreneurial world also we think of, oh, there's your signature story. And Well, if you were speaking and you want to start interacting with people, life might be a bit dull if you couldn't chop and change a little bit. So I would say there is more than one story, and it's the story that tends to help you give an idea of what it has to be relevant to what you're talking about. So yes, I'd say that definitely there could be lots and lots of stories that could be relevant, and then there could be your bigger story, like why you got into what you're doing. And people usually love to hear that, especially if there's the more you can tell them about yourself, they love that. But yes, there can be so many different parts of your life that can feed in to your stories. You've got a treasury of them, and that's what I really love working with clients, is because I love helping them think and see that what that treasury is, that toolbox, and they start to think, oh, I didn't really see it that way, because we tend to, and that's another thing, we tend to think of stories have to have a success at the end. So I think, oh, well, I can't tell you anything because I'm not a multimillionaire yet or anything like that. So it doesn't have to be a formatted story. It has to be adapted to you, and you've got to be comfortable as well. So some people aren't comfortable with sharing their whole life,
Well, it can feel vulnerable to share that deeper part of ourselves with the world. So how do you help people find their story and be open and vulnerable and authentic and confident as they share it?
Well, it's a step-by-step process. So when I tend to do it in one by one or groups, I will often give them ideas of different things so that they can start slowly, and then they find their own path. There's almost like a journey in the story itself. So you've got your story, and then you've got your story of how comfortable you feel about telling those bits. So sometimes it has to be adapted, and it doesn't mean it's not authentic. It just means that when we work together, we find bits that make sense to you. You don't feel that you're revealing information maybe of other people and things like that, and it still can be very authentic.
And what do you think holds people back from being able to speak with confidence?
Well, do you know, one of the biggest things because I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the number one phobia. Public speaking is supposed to be the world's number one phobia, with a fear, or is the fear of public speaking. So number one, and reportedly even greater than that, of death. So there is the fear that you start to get things wrong, and fear is a huge thing that influences our lives, and it is incredibly strong. And so it's very strong. And if you think of it, I used to wonder why on earth it could be greater than death, but it's very, very tribal. So it gets involved with, judgment. Are people going to judge me especially if I'm going to speak my truth and say, oh, by the way, I don't know, let's say if we're empaths and I'm going to tell you about something, oh my goodness, and I've been there, well, people think that's woo-woo. What will they think of me if I tell them I do blah, blah, blah? And so there's this fear of being judged. And it's especially, you would have thought in our modern days, we'd be free of all that, but we seem to be as bad as ever, and we label people. So there's a great fear of being judged. And it goes back to tribal times when literally you could have been placed outside of the citadel and in danger. So that's a big one. I find for me, there's also, then there's the worry about getting it right, getting it perfect, making mistakes. I'm making a mistake at the moment. Last time I spoke to Tiffany, it was dull. And but now every time we have a proper interview, the sun shines, and I'm without walking away and then shutting everything, I'm not being able to put this light out. So there we go. But making mistakes can sometimes be excruciating when you're actually having to speak. If you're doing a blog post and you write a few words wrong, you can quietly go and correct it. But if you're on video, there's this feeling, or actually in real person, there's this feeling of, oh my goodness, I've made this mistake. What will people think of me? And the list goes on. And also a lot, who am I to get out there when they're all these gurus, etc. So there are a lot of things. And somebody asked me the other day, made a comment in a group saying, well, surely everybody's confident when it comes to speaking. Surely everybody's confident. And well, not everybody is. And I'd say that there's also very much a continuum. So even, I've helped people who have been fine with workshops, and then when it came to coming online, with all these things, they really hated it to begin with, because it's not natural, is it? You're looking at this lens, and then you don't necessarily see who's coming to watch you, all of these things. And so, and then you can see your face, and then people start to worry about how they look. So there are lots of different things for different people, and it depends on, the event. So I might be very, very confident doing a certain video, certain talks, but you just add a little bit of pressure. Maybe I'm going to get, I don't know, paid $1 million, and I really need that $1 million. And everything depends on that $1 million, and that pressure puts a lot of confidence. In fact, I'll tell you a secret. That fear that I talked to you about, a lot of successful public speakers also confess to, saying, well, yeah, of course, I get the jitters too, So I just wanted to say, it's not just.
And even for me, there are times when there's certain events that I've had some, jitters. But once I get started, then, blessings are flowing through and I can just get into the zone. But like, I remember speaking on a stage, with 600 people to my peers. Because they were my peers, I was nervous. And then I remember another time I was doing this beauty pageant in high school. I was running for Miss Calaveras, and there were 10,000 people in the audience, but I couldn't see them. So I actually wasn't quite as nervous because I couldn't see their faces, with all the spotlights and stuff.
Oh, yes.
And I think it just depends on the group of people with whom I'm talking to.
Yes.
So do you have any tips for overcoming fear and, getting out of your way?
Well, certainly just giving it a go makes a huge difference, because let's say it's a Facebook Live. We can tend to think about it a great deal. And the more we think, the worse it becomes. And sometimes just getting started. So for example, with a Facebook Live, you can just do it where only you can see it. So you can do it in a way that's totally private. But if you practice it, then you're not having to handle everything at the same time. So, there's the practice. And, also I help with my clients is taking the action, because you can learn as much theory as you want to, especially when it comes to speaking, because that encompasses very much all of our persona, that actually getting out there and trying something, just one little step at a time, makes a difference, and give yourself a pat on the back. I think it's really important, celebrating success, because most of us wait for, oh, well, I don't know, if I have 1,000 views, or we keep on moving the goalposts, and then it's never good enough. So you definitely give yourself a pat on the back, and know that really you are enough as you are, and you've got all this wealth of experience, and people want to know the real you. So if you get a few things wrong, you've got out there. Kudos to you. I think that's just wonderful. And just like you said, Tiffany, when you start to reach your people, and it depends who you're talking to, so it's a different world. And once you start to realize that you've made a difference in the world, then that's really, I think it overcomes everything. Not necessarily
And
fear, but or the discomfort, or the stories, but I think it's invaluable.
And I also noticed that there have been times where I've made some flubs, like forgetting to turn off my microphone when I went to the bathroom. And somehow being able to turn that into like major laughter and being, comfortable in my own skin and being vulnerable and letting, I mean, really, it's vulnerable, right?
It is vulnerable.
And yet somehow that vulnerability had people in the audience love me more. Like that I was fallible, that I was human, that I could make mistakes. And so I think when we don't judge ourselves for making those oops and just use it as an additional teaching moment, or just to like connect in our humanness, that can be really uplifting too.
I think and sometimes mistakes, they are, I mean, they make you giggle, don't they? Because they connect you. And there we are. I'm even having a giggle. I'm supposed to be visible, and the sun's getting me. I'm thinking, I want to go and shut this, but I can't come up with it.
Yes.
That's good, because then when people listen, they say, oh, okay, Marianne doesn't. So she's trying to be visible, and then she's this shadow. Yeah, I think it's true. And some of my sort of bloopers, mistakes, have been a bit of a giggle after a while, and become good teaching points as well. But I love that story. Yes. And then you didn't make it again. I bet you didn't make that same mistake again.
No, I did not. I made sure every time my mic was off. But I was wearing a dress and my mic was in the back, and I didn't think about it because it just, the other people were turning it off and on for me. But I bolted to the bathroom without thinking about it, It's silly things like that. And by the way, Ben's been commenting how he's been enjoying your tips, Mary. And so just wanted to let you know. So if Ben and others want to, connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
You can, I've got a Facebook group. May I mention that?
Yeah, you can mention your Facebook group and your free gift. Go for it.
Okay, lovely. So I've got a Facebook group, Speak to Engage Tribe. So it's like here, Speak to Engage, but with the tribe. That's Facebook. And then Tiffany's going to put a link for my gift, which is 5 steps to speak your truth and connect with others. And that sort of goes into a little bit about my story, some of my mistakes, but also a few steps to get you started, which a little bit expand a little bit about what we've been talking. Yeah.
Wonderful. Any final words? I'm going to type your gift in here, but anything else that you would want us to know before we close shop for the day?
Well, I suppose my final message is that getting out there and speaking your truth through story, it seems a bit daunting at first, but when you start to allow yourself to be yourself, life becomes a bit more fun, and you start to, when you get out there and be more yourself, even though you might make mistakes like I've been doing, then and you can have a laugh about it, you're going to open up and attract people, more of your tribe, the people you want to attract. So, and you've already got what it takes to be yourself. You've already got a wealth of experience. So it's a matter of getting out there, taking courage. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I put Marianne's gift, the link for it, in the chat, and it's also at the bottom of your screen. So you can go there and pick it up, and she'll give you the 5 steps to speak to engage, and you can connect with her later. So please go for it. And thank you guys for being on a great participant today on the show. Reach out to me, reach out to Marianne. And if you want to be a guest, connect with me, and we'll see if you're a coach or a healer or contribute to empaths, then let's definitely have a conversation offline. And I would love to get to know you more and learn more about you anyways. So have a beautiful, wonderful week. Much love and blessings. Namaste.